And I call on Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, the First Minister was asked a series of serious questions about why hundreds of thousands of doses of vaccine were not reaching GPs quickly enough. The questions asked were based on the evidence, the testimony of GPs, the testimony of the GP chair of BMA Scotland, the testimony of Scots over 80s who've heard nothing about when they will be called. In response, we got a bizarre rant that the UK government was throwing a so-called hissy fit about the publication of sensitive future vaccine supply figures. It was quite the change in tone from the Health Secretary's profuse apology on Friday. The First Minister got what she wanted, which was a cheap headline, but the country didn't get what it needed. The country didn't get what it needed, which was answers. So instead of trying to throw blame onto others, will the First Minister finally explain to the country why the vaccine rollout is lagging behind in Scotland? Why are hundreds of thousands of vaccine doses not reaching GPs and patients quickly enough?
First Minister.
I'll take each of these points in turn because all of them are important. Let me first of all say the vaccination programme is not lagging behind in Scotland. I set out yesterday that we had very deliberately focused first on elderly residents in care homes. Why did we do that? Because these are the people, according to the JCVI, who are most vulnerable to becoming ill and dying from COVID. So we have now vaccinated with the first dose more than 90% of those elderly residents of care homes. And that is what we think will have the biggest and most immediate impact in reducing the death toll from this virus, which, as we heard from the figures I reported today, is still far too high. And the reason why the overall numbers, therefore, are lower at this stage because of that focus in care homes is because it takes longer and is more labour-intensive to vaccinate in care homes than it is in the community. Interestingly, I've seen some comments this morning attributed to the UK government explaining why the daily rate of vaccination in England has dropped over the past 3 days, and the explanation given is that they have decided to focus more this week on catching up in care homes, and it takes longer. Therefore, the wider programme has slowed down as a result. So we are all grappling with the same issues and we are all working to the same targets. Second point is GP supply, and I look, as the Health Secretary does, at these numbers every single day. I go to sleep at night with these numbers in my head. I wake up in the morning with them in my head, as is right and proper. AstraZeneca, and I'm talking about AstraZeneca here because that's the vaccine that is being used by our GPs. The vaccine comes in packs, normally packs of 100 doses, sometimes I understand perhaps of 80 doses. The supply, the shipment into Scotland has not, until recently, delivered enough packs for all GPs to have a pack of vaccine, remembering, of course, that some GPs will require multiple packs because their patient populations are bigger. Right now, and this figure will be moving all of the time, 75% of GP practices either have supply or are in the process of getting supply. That figure will never be 100% because not every single GP practice, of course, is participating in doing vaccinations. In terms of the over 80s, that is now picking up, and as I said yesterday, we reckon now, these are estimates from management information, this information will be published on a weekly basis, but we estimate that now around 20% of over 80s have been vaccinated. And my final point, Presiding Officer, because these are important issues, you can see from our daily figures that our community vaccination, the vaccination programme overall, is ramping up. So if you look at the numbers of vaccines administered on Monday this week, 19,600, that is an increase of 56% on the previous Monday. Interestingly, since comparisons are being made by others, not by me, the increase in England from one Monday to the next was less than 40%. So our rate of increase is actually higher there as we come out of care homes and go into the community. And of course, yesterday, based on the figures I have just reported, 25,327 vaccinations were administered, which is more than Monday. So we are on an increasing trajectory of vaccination as we step up and pick up the pace in the over 80s. And of course, we are working to a target of vaccinating all over 80s and everybody in the JCVI groups 1 and 2 by the first week in February. So these are the targets we're all working to. I see commentary in the media elsewhere in the UK criticising the pace in England. These, if we look at this on a daily basis, we will always find questions to raise, and that's right and proper, but the progress of the vaccination programme is strong. My job, the Health Secretary's job, is to ensure that it remains so.
Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Prioritising care homes, as the Scottish Conservatives have always argued we should, doesn't explain why GP surgeries who should have doses of vaccine sitting in their fridges don't. The problem here is this insistence from the First Minister that this is all on track. But Health Secretary Jean Freeman said on the 11th of January that all over 80s would have the vaccine by the end of this month, which is the 31st of January. But this morning, the Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, rolled back on that commitment, saying instead that I can confidently say to you that the commitments we have given, that the over 80s, for example, will all be vaccinated by the end of the first week of February, is a commitment that will be fulfilled, repeated just now by the First Minister. So the Health Secretary's committed to all over 80s being vaccinated by the 31st of January, but the Deputy First Minister has committed to the 7th of February. The First Minister called this vaccination programme a race against COVID, and I agree with her sense of urgency. So why are we already falling behind?
First Minister.
Well, there's 3 points here, and I'll again take them one by one, because Ruth Davidson is just wrong on all of them, actually. Firstly, on care homes, it is the case that we have been focusing on care homes, rightly so, because that is the quickest way to reduce the death toll, because people in care homes are most vulnerable. And how many times over the past year, rightly, have I stood here and been under pressure to answer questions about the death toll and the wider toll of this virus in our care homes? So it's right that we have prioritised care homes. Indeed, it is what the JCVI recommended, and it does take longer. This is what I've seen it being reported that the UK government has been saying today to explain the dip in the English vaccination rate, daily vaccination rate over the past few days. The explanation: there has been a big push to finish vaccinating care homes, and they take more time, 4 to 6 hours each, hence slowing the overall effort. So, you know, it is the case that when you focus in care homes, you don't do as many because it takes longer. But we, unlike the UK government, who, I don't know what their figure is now, at the start of the week I think it was only 50% of care home residents vaccinated, we're now over 90% and therefore able to speed up the rest of the programme. Secondly, on the timing of over 80s, I mean, Ruth Davidson can go back, and I think the first time, certainly in this year, I spoke about this was last week in one of my daily updates, and I said that we would do over 80s within 4 weeks, which was always that first week in February. That is not a change. I said it in Parliament again yesterday, the start of February. That is the target date for vaccinating all of the JCVI groups 1 and 2. And then, of course, we do the groups 3 and 4, and the target date for that is mid-February. Again, I've seen comments from the UK government this morning talking about the rephasing of Pfizer supply, making that a very tight target to meet, but one that we're all determined to do. And lastly, just to repeat, because it possibly didn't get heard by Ruth Davidson the first time I said it, on GP supply, I've set out the supply constraints we've had so far in terms of getting packs of vaccine to every GP practice. That is speeding up as supply speeds up, and the figure, which again will be moving all the time, will no doubt be different by the end of today than it is right now. 75% of GP practices already have or are in the process of receiving their supply. But again, the figures speak for themselves. From Monday last week to Monday this week, a 56% increase in daily vaccination. From Monday to Tuesday, yesterday, a further increase in the rate of vaccination. So the numbers at the moment speak for themselves. They're going in the right direction. My job is to make sure they continue to do so.
Ruth Davidson.
But the Health Minister said the end of January, and you cannot get away from that. Now, the First Minister has just said, before she sat down there, that the figures speak for themselves. And she's right, because the numbers here are pretty straightforward. As the Deputy First Minister has now accepted, the Scottish Government is in receipt of a total of 700,000 doses. But to vaccinate the first of the priority groups, which is care home residents, staff, healthcare workers, and everybody over the age of 80, the Scottish Government, by their own figures, need 560,000 vaccine doses. Again, by their own figures released on the 11th of January, the Scottish Government already had 490,000 doses sitting ready to go a fortnight ago. So the Scottish Government was already sitting on enough stocks to vaccinate 87.5% of their target groups and have been for a fortnight. Today, we hear that 309,909 have actually received the vaccine, which is 55%. And now the delivery date has slipped by a week. Why? Can the First Minister confirm that the stocks from even 2 weeks ago have reached GPs?
First Minister.
Okay, we'll go through this point by point again, because they're all important points, but again, Ruth Davidson's wrong, and I'm going to take her on a bit of a logic journey on this as well, which may not take her where she wants to go. But firstly, there is a difference, and those of us who pore over this on a daily basis have to understand these differences between allocation and actual delivery and what we have in hand in Scotland. And the majority of doses that are in Scotland are actually already in people's arms, and the rest of them will be supplying GPs and other vaccination centres to make sure over the next few days they get into people's arms. That is, how a supply chain of anything works. But here's the logic journey. If Ruth Davidson's whole argument here is based on the premise that we've somehow got 700,000 doses, and remember the UK government are adamant they don't want us to talk about the total number of doses that have been allocated, but let's take what she's saying. If that is the case, then that must mean that, given that we're getting our proportionate population-based share, the UK government for England have got 7 million doses. They haven't done 7 million vaccinations, so presumably they're also sitting on supplies for no reason, in the same way that Ruth Davidson is suggesting we are. That would be the logical conclusion of that argument. It's actually about a complex, really important, but a complex supply chain that everybody is working to make sure gets from the manufacturers to the arms of people across the country as quickly as possible. And we've been successful in making sure that almost all of our most vulnerable care home residents have already got that first dose of vaccine. And finally, on this point about end of January versus the beginning of February, we refine these target dates as we go along based on our developing understanding of supply. So if the Health Secretary did, and I can't recall, but if she did say a few weeks ago the end of January, we will now know more about supply that have made us, through the modelling we do, say that that's the first few days in February. We've been saying that consistently throughout this year. So there is no change in that. That is what we are working to. That is what we are on track to deliver. And I would suggest that Ruth Davidson perhaps just delves a little bit more into the detail of how all of this works if she wants to continue to have these exchanges.
Ruth Davidson.
There we have it, Presiding Officer. It's not a slip, it's a refinement. But the problems here have been building for some time, and the Scottish Government continues to stand by and furiously repeat that everything is fine. But GPs and the BMA are sounding the alarm, and they are raising the red flags, not to be awkward, but because they and us and everyone wants this vaccination programme to work, and time is of the essence. And it is important that the First Minister acknowledges problems and starts to fix them. There are hundreds of thousands of vaccine doses that have gone unused for weeks, while GPs are desperate to get their hands on it. We asked last week when all over 80s would get their letter notifying them when they would be vaccinated, and we got no answer. We asked yesterday when all GPs would have the supplies they need to accelerate the pace, and we got no answer. And I have just asked if even all available stocks from a fortnight ago have been distributed to GPs, and I've got no answer. And the simple fact is, this isn't good enough. Vaccine isn't getting to GPs as it should. Over 80s are being left waiting when they shouldn't have to, and government timescales are already slipping. Sorry, being refined. What action is the First Minister going to take to get this sorted out and get Scotland's vaccination rate back on track?
First Minister.
Can I say, if Ruth Davidson, in a programme like this, doesn't think it is really important and responsible for governments to refine estimates as knowledge of supplies increases, then I think it will just be another reason why many people across the country are breathing a real sigh of relief that she's not standing here right now. So one of the things that has changed, and if Ruth Davidson's not aware of this, it's on the front page of the UK Times today with the UK government talking about it. Pfizer has just rephased its supply over the next few months. So over this month and next month, we are going to have fewer doses of Pfizer. We'll have the same overall, but the phasing of that is different. Now, is Ruth Davidson seriously suggesting that in the face of a change like that, a government shouldn't refine its estimates for when it will be able to deliver vaccine into people's arms? Because if she is suggesting that, then I think that is ludicrous, to be perfectly honest about it. Now, let me just answer some of the other points. Letters to over 80s. Many GP practices are not sending letters to over 80s. Do you know why? Because they are phoning them because it's quicker. So that as soon as they have the supplies, they are phoning them to make the quickest appointment that they can. That happened last week to a very close relative of mine in the over 80 category. Got a phone call from a GP practice and within a couple of days had her first dose of the vaccine. That is how this has been done, to make sure it is as quickly as possible. So as the supplies come in, and I've set out twice just now what the supply constraint has been in getting packs to every GP practice, but I'll repeat again, 75% of GPs have or are in the process of getting that supply, and as soon as they get it, they contact their over 80s to get them in. But I come back to the central numbers here. Our vaccination programme is gathering pace. 50% increase in the daily numbers of people vaccinated from last Monday to this Monday, a further increase from Monday to Tuesday this week. Having done more than 90% of care home residents, we're picking up pace now in the over 80s. These are the facts in a very, very complex situation, and I will continue on a daily basis to focus on the detail and actually focus on understanding the detail of this so that we do get it right, not just for the over 80s, but for the over 70s, the over 50s, and as soon as supplies allow us to, for the whole adult population.